how to trigger a desktop run from Zapier in Axiom AI. I'm Alex Barlow, co-founder of Axiom. Let's dive in. You can easily trigger cloud runs from Zapier using our Zapier app or a straightforward webhook. However, since webhooks cannot trigger desktop runs, you'll need a simple workaround that involves using a Google Sheet. What we do is set up a Zap to create a new row in a Google Sheet, and then our automation in Axiom AI will read from that Google Sheet, checking it for a new row. If it doesn't find a row, it won't run. And then if it finds a row, it will run. And that's how you trigger a desktop run from Zapier. Let me take you through it step by step. Next up, let's set up our Google Sheet. I'm going to go into the tab where I've already got my sheet open. And first of all, this is a requirement of Zapier, so please do follow this. You have to give your columns a table header, essentially, or a column header for each. So I'm going to quickly type in trigger run, and I'm only using the single column, but your first row has to have table headers in for this to work. So then I'm going to use this option, view actions more and freeze row, and that essentially behaves like a header now. Okay, that's my Google Sheet set up. We can now proceed to Zapier. So I'm going to click into Zapier. I've got a blank Zapier or Zap already open. You, of course, may be editing one you've already created. What you need to do is add an action. And we're going to use the Google Sheets action there. Next, we configure it. And we start with the action event. And what we're going to do is type in create. We want to create a spreadsheet row, not rows, a row. So we're just making a single row to be clear. Then we press select in account. So integrate your Google Sheets account. Then we can press continue. Ignore drive. Go to the spreadsheet value, choosing the sheet that you've created. Then your worksheet value. And you'll see Zapier is pulled in the table header you just saw me set up in my Google Sheet. And that's where we're going to enter the value that we check for. And that value we're going to set as run. So basically this action will create a new row with the string run every time the Zap is triggered. And we're going to use that to then trigger our run in Axiom. I'm going to press continue now. That's the step set up. What I can do at this point is run a test to make sure it's writing to the Google Sheet. The Google Sheet is currently empty as we saw. And if I click test step, it will run. And you can see it's added a value. So that's the Zap set up. Now onto Axiom. So now we need to set up Axiom to check for the row that the Zap creates. That's simple enough to do. I'm going to show you a blank Axiom, but you can just add these steps to your existing Axiom. I'm going to click add first step. I'm going to start off with a read data from a Google Sheet step. Because basically we're going to set Axiom on a scheduled loop, so it keeps reading from the sheet until it finds a new row. I'm going to open up spreadsheet, drop down there, add the sheet. The sheet name should be pulled in then by default, and we can actually see we've got the preview there. But before we finish setting up the step, we need to specify a first cell, last cell, because we know the header will be there already, but the run won't always be there. And what we want to do is read not from A1, but A2. So that's column A, row 2. Oh, that's basically the area or the cell we'll check in the sheet, I should say, to make sure there's a value there, and then we know to run the Axiom. Okay, so that step is set up, and the functionality we're using in that step is that when that step is triggered in the run, it will look for data in the sheet. If it doesn't find it, it's going to end the run and not use any of your runtime. If it finds it, it will continue the run. So that's the handy feature we're using of that step to trigger our desktop runs from Zapier. Next up, we need to delete the value from the Google Sheet. Because we're going to run this essentially on a loop, it's going to keep checking for rows every time it's finished running. We want to make sure we remove the value that Zapier adds, and then only when the zap is triggered again and it adds a new value, then the whole process repeats itself. So what we do is delete a row. And of course, we need to set the row to row, the second row that we want to delete and not the first. But we do also need to specify the sheet. So that's set up, and that's almost all of this part of the bot set up. All that's left to do now to get it working is to set up the scheduler. To do that, go to the cog in the vertical menu here, click on Settings, open the scheduler, toggle to on, set your start date and your time. Then you want to set your frequency, but now because you're using the desktop runner, you want to make sure that's toggled on first, and then you'll be given the correct options to set your frequency. And if you need this to run fairly often to make sure to keep checking for any new values to trigger your run, select minutes, because it won't use up all your runtime, because if there's not a value there, as I mentioned, the bot won't run and use any runtime. So that will basically check every minute. But if you don't need to check every minute, please do adjust it to how the frequency that you need. So for example, you could run it once every 15 minutes. Cool. That is how to trigger a desktop run using Zapier. So essentially all you do is write a new row with your Zap to a Google Sheet, and you use your bot in Axiom to check for that new row. If it finds it, it runs. Thank you.